Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for the member reporting webinar. I'm just going to go ahead and go through each tab of the tool and plug in some numbers and give some examples, and then I'll answer questions. So at any time throughout the webinar, if you think of a question, feel free to drop it in the chat box, and I will answer those at the end. Or if it's pressing, Sam will let me know and I'll answer it. So right now we're on the cover sheet here. And you're gonna fill in this basic information at the top. And since you're doing this monthly, the only thing that you'll have to change after you fill it out once is the date here. So I already have it all filled out with my information. And then if you scroll down, these are all the categories where the data from the tabs on the spreadsheet down here will aggregate. So when you plug in your numbers, formulas will bring those numbers to this page. And you'll see that after I do plug some numbers in. Okay, so going to the volunteers tab, this is the first tab here. And you can see the categories at the top. There's the 3 focus areas of the NeighborWorks VISTA program here, which is financial literacy, housing, and employment. And then if you scroll down, there's instructions for each tab, and this is on every tab of the sheet. And then there are some key terms with definitions. So if you're looking at a category and you don't know what something means, check here first, and then you can always ask me too. So I'll give an example here. And this is just made up, but hopefully it'll help you understand how the sheet works. So say that I'm reporting on my first month of service. And in that first month of service, I developed a social media campaign to recruit volunteers for a tutoring program where residents would be tutored in financial literacy. So that social media campaign would count as 1 volunteer management practice. All right, and then from that social media campaign, I recruited 10 volunteers. So I would put 10 in the number of volunteers recruited. And after I recruited the volunteers, we hosted the tutoring sessions. There were 2 of them, and they were each an hour. So each volunteer served 2 hours, making the total number of hours served 20. All right, this gets a little bit tricky here. So you can see that there's 2 categories for numbers of volunteers. In the number of volunteers recruited, you want to make sure that that's the number of volunteers that you actually recruited and are new volunteers in that month that you're reporting on. Any volunteers that you have from before that month will go in the volunteers managed category. So since hypothetically this was my first month of service, I would have 0 volunteers managed. And then the hours they served would be 0. All right, and then over here, this is the number of beneficiaries. So let's say that 5 residents came to both of the 2 tutoring sessions. That's a total of 10 residents or 10 economically disadvantaged individuals who received financial literacy services. And then down here, this is the number of economically disadvantaged individuals with improved financial knowledge. So I would say that all 10 of the participants have improved financial knowledge. The thing about this is that, you need to be able to back up this data somehow. So in order to calculate whether residents have improved financial knowledge, you would need to develop some type of survey in order to figure that out and have proof of the fact that those individuals actually had improved financial knowledge. And having proof of all of these numbers is really important. So no matter where you're putting data into this sheet, you need to have some way to back that up. So if you're saying that you recruited 10 volunteers, you need to have proof of those volunteers and keep records of them. Okay. So moving on to the resource development tab, You can see again the instructions and the definitions here. This is where you're going to measure grants, cash resources, and in-kind resources. So going back to my example, let's say that for both of those 2 tutoring sessions, a local restaurant donated snacks and beverages for the residents, and that the total value of those snacks and beverages was $100. Again, you would need proof of this number, so you don't want to guess. In this case, I would have requested a voided invoice for those snacks and beverages from the restaurant so that I had the actual dollar amount. And we'll say that in my first month, I didn't write any grants or funding proposals. But the thing about this category here is that you only want to put down grants or funding proposals that you as the VISTA had a very heavy hand in. So if you were just assisting with something like data acquisition, then that wouldn't be applicable here. So this needs to be something that you did the majority of the work on or had a heavy hand in. And I'm also going to put a 0 here because I didn't receive any cash resources. All right, and here's the Community Needs Assessment tab. So not everyone will complete a Community Needs Assessment, so this may be blank for you. Also, even if you are completing a community assessment, you probably won't be doing one every month. So this tab might often be blank for you. And I'm just going to put a 0 here for now. And not every section in the sheet needs to be complete. You're probably going to have a lot of 0s, and that's perfectly okay. Sam, do I have any questions at this time in the chat box?
No questions.
Okay. Okay. But an example, I'll give an example of a community needs assessment. So that would be like a survey to determine the needs of the residents in the community. And when you complete that survey, you would count one survey as one community needs assessment, even if you surveyed 200 people. It's still one community needs assessment.
Okay. One question.
Okay.
Could you explain the volunteers managed once again, please?
Yes. Yeah, that's a tricky one. All right, so back on the volunteers page here. Number of volunteers recruited is going to be any new volunteers during that month. So those are volunteers that you recruited. In my example, they would be the people who I recruited through the social media campaign. Number of volunteers managed excludes those new people. So if you have volunteers from before that month that you recruited in a previous month, or that were just pre-existing volunteers with the organization, but you're managing those volunteers, they would go here. So these should never be, you should never be counting the same volunteers in both places. Either you recruited them or you managed them. And next month, those 10 volunteers that I recruited would move over to the managed, and then I would write any new volunteers recruited in the recruited tab.
Yeah, and then there's also, if you scroll down, there's a definition of what managed volunteers are. So
here we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that definition is here. Okay. So I'm going to move ahead now, and I can go back to this again at the end if people still have questions. So the next tab would be the training tab. And you can see the categories here. Let's say, going back to my example, that for the financial literacy tutoring program, after I recruited those 10 volunteers, I held a training to train those volunteers to be tutors. So that would be one training event. And we'll say the training was 2 hours. And it was just the volunteers that I recruited that participated, so it would be 10 here. Okay. All right, I'm going to move through to the new business processes here. So this is another kind of tricky one. In my example, I would have one new business process, which would be the social media campaign that I created to recruit volunteers. And for this example, if you're creating a social media campaign to either help with awareness, education, volunteer recruitment, then the entire campaign is going to be counted as one business system. So no matter how many platforms you're using, you could do, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. That would still be one new business process. Okay. And another example of a new business process would be developing a database. That would be a new business process that you would put here. All right, so this is the miscellaneous tab. This tab really captures the demographics of the community that you're serving. And the three categories that are captured here are veterans and family of service members, youth, and what's the other one?
Foreclosure.
Right, and foreclosure prevention services. So if you're providing foreclosure prevention services, then you would put the number of households here. The same goes with number of community members served in terms of youth and veterans. And then if you completed a community impact survey, then you would write the number of homes surveyed here. So that would also go under the community needs assessment tab, where you would record it as one survey. And then going back to the miscellaneous tab, here is where you capture the number of homes. So if you surveyed 100 homes, then you would write 100 in this tab. All right, and the last tab is stories from the field. This one is really important because, as I said, all of those numbers that you wrote in the rest of the sheet, you need to be able to back those up, and here's where you explain where you got those numbers from. So if you wrote a grant proposal, you're going to want to write in how much money you're requesting, what organization you are requesting it from, and how that money would impact your organization. And you want to do that for any number that's not self-explanatory. So if there's something left unsaid by the number itself, you want to write that in here. And you just type into this box right here. And then you'll go back to the cover sheet where you can see all the data aggregating. So everything is going to pop up here from the rest of the sheet. And this is where we're going to pull numbers from to report to CNCS. And so you can see this is a lot of zeros, but in my example, it was my first month of service. And also everyone's not doing everything. So it's totally normal to have a lot of zeros. And you shouldn't be concerned about that. I know it looks a little strange, but totally normal. All right, so anyone have any questions?
Suzanne had a question in the chat, but I answered it, so if you want to review that,
okay,
you can.
Okay. How would you report? Okay, so we have a question. How would you report data collection and compiling reports? I think I need a little bit of clarification on that question that I just read. If you would just clarify in the chat. Moving forward, could you explain where to document service if our primary task is research and outreach? Okay, so I think what that question is getting to is these categories here: financial literacy, housing, and employment. So your services are going to fall under that category in one way or another. And those activities will fall under one of those categories. So if it's not clear from your VAD which category that is, that's a good thing to talk to your supervisor about. And you can also come to me if it's still unresolved at that point, and I'll help you work through that. Okay. Where did I leave off, Sam?
Okay, hold on. So
from Portia.
Yeah. Oh, she said never mind.
Okay.
Okay.
Gather data. Okay, so here's a question. How to report improving existing business processes. So there's no numerical category for this?
You can. Yeah, so
so
the new business processes is also for
okay, and enhancements. Right.
Yeah, so
okay.
If you're overhauling it, then yes, that would include. But if you're just making a few edits to it, then that you wouldn't include that. It's similar to what you would do for the grants in that section before.
Okay, yeah, so that goes here as well.
And Janet, can you send us an email kind of clarifying? So what I'm seeing is that you're gathering data about homeowners, income levels, transportation foreclosures, etc., and reporting for the purpose of determining needs in target areas. That would be a community needs assessment. So I think you're asking like which objective or like area like financial literacy, housing, and employment falls into. Basically, you're going to figure out what service that information is going to apply to. So if you're like foreclosures deals with housing, so it probably goes in there. But if you have more questions, you can reach out to Charlotte and give a little bit more explanation about what your VAD is actually asking you to do, and then she can help you from there.
Yeah, it can be really helpful to look at your VAD for reference when you're trying to figure out which focus area your activities fall under. And that's something that I can definitely help with and that your supervisor might be able to help with too. Okay. Any more questions?
Did we answer everyone's question that asked one?
True.
If we didn't answer your question, you can unmute yourself or you can send it in the chat.
Okay, so I am seeing a question here from Suzanne in the beginning that says, so this would be you as a VISTA doing this service, or is it your agency? You're recording in this sheet the things that you as a VISTA do or have a heavy hand in. So you might be collaborating with other people in your agency, but if you didn't have a role in that activity, then you're not recording it here.
So Suzanne, like if your organization is doing a community needs assessment and it's not a part of like your task on your VAD, then that wouldn't be something that you're involved with, even if you're supporting your organization. But if everything has to kind of tie back to what your VAD is.
I'll stay on the line here for a little while. So if you think of a question, just pop it in the chat box.
Question.
Okay. This is a monthly report. Yes. Excuse me. And you're not turning this in to us, to me or Debbie or anyone here in DC. You're reporting this to your supervisor. And it should be saved in some type of shared drive, whether that's on the cloud or in your network. But you should be saving this every month and updating it every month. Yeah. And then your supervisor is going to use the data from these reports to make a 6-month report to us. So it's really important that you make sure your data is correct and that it's all falling where it needs to on the cover page. Then your supervisor is going to take 6 months of data, add it together, and send it to us. And then we report up to CNCS. What question are you working on, Sam?
Selena's question.
Okay. So Nadia asked, is the needs assessment the same as the community impact survey? No, they are not the same. The community impact survey is a much more specific thing. The needs assessment is a really broad lens. So any type of survey that you're doing of the community is going to fall under that, whereas the community impact survey is a very specific survey. So we have a question, if you're directly involved in something that the organization did that would fit in the spreadsheet, but it wasn't directly related to the VAD, do you put it in the report?
You can put it on the last page.
Yeah, so you would put that on the last page. Let me go back. So under,
No, you added
oh.
Just click on the.
I'm good.
Okay.
So here is where you would record those. So if it's not on your VAD, but you worked on it with your organization, and it's something that you would put on this sheet otherwise, here is where you would record that. So number of additional activities and or program outputs produced, and number of additional types of services offered. So that's where you would record those.
And Suzanne, can you send us or Charlotte an email kind of talking about your situation so that we can follow up with you specifically?
Yeah, that would be great, Suzanne. Thank you. Okay, am I missing any questions here? So yeah, Selena asked, do we here at NeighborWorks America ever see this sheet? And the answer is no. We might ask to see it if we come do a site visit. We're gonna make sure that you've been doing it and saving it. So that's something to know, but you're never sending it to us. You're just making sure that your supervisor has access so that they can draw the data from it when it's time to do the 6 months report. And that's really important because 6 months is a lot of data to put in one report. So you want to make sure that you're doing this every month so that it's handy for that purpose. So the question is, when should we complete it? So you should have started collecting, your data from the start of your service. If you would rather have that round into like a calendar month, that works too, but you should be recording, your entire service. So we don't prescribe exactly what date you have it due by. The important thing is that you're doing it every month and that you're not missing any data. There's no holes in the data. So Nadia asked in the chat, do we ever note how many households participated in a community needs assessment that we did? And Sam did answer in the chat, but I'll just repeat it here. Yes, you're gonna answer it on this page here, stories from the field. So there's no place to put the number itself, but you wanna write about it in here. So you'll tell the story of, why you did that needs assessment, who you surveyed, how many people, and the results. And you wanna write that all here, yeah. We had another question. What if our work does not fit into any of the categories except for the last page? Will that be enough? We try to make it fit. So there is a way in most situations, almost all situations, to make your work fit under a specific category. And maybe Sam can sort of give an example from her service because she was a NeighborWorks VISTA herself.
Right, so I did a Green Leaders program, which seems like it doesn't fit into any of those categories. But I ended up being able to make it fit into financial literacy because the ultimate goal of the program was to reduce costs for our residents. So you probably will have to think about like what are the goals of your organization and what are they focusing on, and then how is your project involved in that and what impact is it having. And that's when the stories from the field really makes a big difference, because your work definitely falls into one of those categories, because those are the things that NeighborWorks organizations participate in with housing, employment, and financial literacy. So Emilio, if you have any questions, if you want to share what your work is, you can email Charlotte and then she can help you with that.
Yes. That goes for any questions. I know it can be confusing, so let me know if you have issues. One thing I would suggest, if you haven't, done the work of going through this sheet yet and reporting the data that you have so far from your year, and you haven't had your check-in call yet, you might want to do that before your check-in call with me so that I can answer any questions that you have as you're completing it. But you can also reach me, by phone or email anytime on the fly. So I'm available to you.
Now, also the webinar is being recorded, so you can reference this later and it'll be on our YouTube page.
Yes.
I'm seeing no more questions in the chat.
I know. Well, this has been brief, but I will let you guys go, and please just email me or call me with any other questions you have, especially as you're actually going through and filling out the report. Let me know if you run into any roadblocks. And if your site has had VISTAs before, your supervisor might be a really good reference for that too. If not, that's okay. That's why I'm here. So just let me know if you're having any struggles with that. But thank you all again for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And I hope this was helpful. And I hope I got, most of the questions that people have right now. Don't hesitate to reach out if you think of anything else. All right. And thanks to being here and helping.
No problem.
All right. Bye, everybody. Oh, one more thing.
Lisa, thank you.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon, you guys.